in a republic that is collapsing, right? In a world where Republican virtue is passing from the scene, how do you exert Republican virtue? And Brutus has a very important and in some ways, difficult to know. It's difficult to know what to do with this speech that Brutus has. In Act 2, Scene 1, they're talking about whether they're also going to kill Antony, because Antony is sort of another threat, right? He's a Caesarian. He's on the Caesar side, even though he will eventually become the enemy of Octavian and his opponent in the next civil war. But nevertheless, right? He's now currently he represents a kind of pro-Caesar faction. He loves Julius Caesar, as we will shortly see. And they start to say, well, should we only kill Caesar, or should we just wipe out anybody that might support him? And so here's what they discuss here. Decius, who's one of the conspirators, says, "Shall no man else be touched, but only Caesar?" And Cassius says, "Decius, well urged. I think it is not meet Mark Antony, so well beloved of Caesar, should outlive Caesar. We shall find of him a shrewd contriver, and, his means, if he improve them, may well stretch so far as to annoy us all, which to prevent, let Antony and Caesar fall together." This is kind of the Machiavellian approach, right? And there's a lot of, it's very compelling, if you're going to kill somebody who has a lot of friends and a lot of charisma and an army behind him, shouldn't you take care to cut off the, not just the head, but the tail of the snake, right? This is, of course, Macbeth also freaks out when it turns out that Banquo's son remains alive. And it's the same question, right? Do we exile or kill all of our enemies? Brutus says, "Our course will seem too bloody, Caius Cassius, to cut the head off and then hack the limbs, like wrath in death and envy afterwards. For Antony is but a limb of Caesar. Let's be sacrificers, but not butchers, Caius. We all stand up against the spirit of Caesar, and in the spirit of men there is no blood. Oh, that we then could come by Caesar's spirit and not dismember Caesar. But alas, Caesar must bleed for it. And gentle friends, let's kill him boldly, but not wrathfully. Let's carve him as a dish fit for the gods, not hew him as a carcass fit for hounds. And let our hearts, as subtle masters do, stir up their servants to an act of rage, and after seem to chide him. This shall make our purpose necessary and not envious, which so appearing to the common eyes, we shall be called purgers, not murderers. And for Mark Antony, think not of him, for he can do no more than Caesar's arm when Caesar's head is off." Very remarkable, and even in some sense noble aspiration, kind of related to some of the stuff. I guest hosted Liz Wheeler's show recently, which you should go check out if you haven't. And I was talking about the Lindsay Law Effect, which we talked about before, the Aristotelian observation that you need to change laws, but you also need to not change laws too often, because the continuity of the law has an inherent value. People need to know that the law just doesn't change every 5 minutes so that they can have trust in the stability of the system. And the Supreme Court, similarly, right, by choosing to kick the question of abortion to the states, even if you think that it ought to be a constitutional question, you can still recognize the wisdom in saying, we're not just going to fight this out every 50 years in a new Supreme Court decision, right? They're trying to reestablish some stability. And it's very difficult to do that when you're in a world of politics by violence. And so Brutus is attempting, right, to reestablish Republican freedom. And he wants, to make a show, essentially, of not just plunging Rome into more bloodbath and recrimination. He says, Antony is, and Caesar, in fact, is, we're not even here to kill Caesar. The blood is not the point. It's just that Caesar, as an entity, as a political entity, has become unbearable for us to endure as free men, and so he has to go. But people will look at us and think that we are just introducing rule by violence if we continue also to kill others, because then where does it end, right? Then you just enter into this sort of cycle of lawlessness, which is what they're trying to fix. Very difficult from within the system of lawlessness to fix the lawlessness, put an end to it. And so that's what Brutus aspires to, perhaps naively, right? Because it's going to turn out that Antony does not just fall dead like the limb of Caesar, doesn't just fall lifeless and motionless and kind of come over to the Republican side like the limb of Caesar.